OnEducation is sponsored by Participate, a community learning platform where the world learns together. Later in the episode, we'll hear about one of Participate's partners, The Sandbox, and how you can get involved in its free community learning opportunities and live streams.
Maybe we might be like President Anthony Weiner right now if it wasn't for like, if he could have undone, pictures of his D. So
imagine that.
Welcome to OnEducation, part of the On Podcast Media Network. My name is Mike Washburn.
And I'm Glenn Urban. Friends, we have an awesome pod for you today. We will discuss whether the new paid Twitter is worth the cost, how states are moving to limit how teachers can discuss race in their classrooms, and our guest this week is educator and co-founder of Together for Justice, Keturah Proctor.
So school is out for you guys.
Yes. We always have this discussion that's in Ontario, you guys go a really long time. Yes.
So
how, is it 2 more weeks?
3 more weeks.
3 more weeks. Wow.
My wife is done the 29th of June.
Oh my Lord.
It goes right till the end of June.
And that's typical throughout Canada or just the province of Ontario?
I believe that is the same everywhere in Canada.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe that the school year is everywhere in Canada is the same. Now, yeah, and then we're back the first day after Labor Day.
Yeah.
So Labor Day is September whatever, 4th,
the
3rd,
first
somewhere around there.
The first Tuesday,
the first Monday
after kind of is Labor Day, and then you guys go on Tuesday like we do?
That's right. No? Yeah,
okay,
Tuesday after Labor Day.
Okay.
So,
but you guys
sometimes you get lucky and that stretches into like I think last year it was like September the 9th or 10th before they started.
That's true. Yes.
Yeah, it was
a good
dope.
year for that too.
Right. So I'm not sure what it is this year, but you guys are done. Like you don't have to do anything anymore.
I'm done, man. Yeah, different people have different contracts, depending upon what they are. I mean, all the teachers are done, and I'm on a regular teaching contract. So on Friday, it was like, I'm out. I mean, there's still a lot of stuff that needed to be done, and we have a tech team. For example, our director of technology, and we have some technology support. And my colleague, for example, she has a different contract, so it's a little bit extended. But most of us, we were done. So, Audrey on our OnEducation team, she works in the same district that I do, and she's works in an elementary school, and she was done. Yeah. So it's kind of weird. Tomorrow's going to be an awesome day. Usually I clean today on Sundays, and I didn't even clean today. I did some stuff outside. I walked with Nicole. It's really, really hot here. So it's, and then I did some stuff this morning, just like random things, garden things. So it was awesome. Yeah. It's kind of, nice. I mean, it's school is officially out. So for those of you guys that are still going, you guys got this. 3 weeks left.
So you made it. Barely, but you made it.
Yeah.
What do you put the odds like? So was school fairly normal for you by the end in terms of
we had a graduation, Mike. It was weird, and for the first time, because of the governor's, we reached the specific we reached a threshold that was set up by him. It was actually set up really smartly. Basically, if this number of people get vaccinated, then I will open up everything. And it worked in our state. I know in many states that's not the case, but in our states, we're one of the highest in the nation as far as the percentage. And so it was weird because the kids, we still had the governor got on a call and made this announcement and said, there's no mandates anymore there's no masking rules anymore for indoors. There's no you have to stay a certain number of distance, and there is no specific crowd sizes anymore. So it was a complete opening up. Well, we still had a few weeks of school left when this happened. So the Department of Education cleared up that there still was this law that was had been enacted and we were going to carry it through the end of the year. So you can imagine we were afraid that kids were like, yeah, I'm not doing that, but our kids, they followed suit. They did what they needed to go ahead and do. And on graduation, we weren't in the school building anymore. So we saw each other's faces, kids, teachers for the first time this year. It was the first time, besides going outside, kind of that side. So that was amazing. It was the first event that we've had of any kind with no social distancing necessary, whatever it might be. And we had it in a hockey arena in a neighboring town. And it was weird. We were like getting tickets from people. There was big crowds. It's a graduation.
Were they checking, like, was there any sort of like vaccine card or anything like that?
I think it's just you trust people to do what they're supposed to do. And unfortunately, nobody's wearing a mask. And now, except people that do have still some concerns as far as health concerns.
Sure.
So there are some people that I have seen that do continue to wear masks, especially out in crowds. I think that's going to be something that we're going to see.
Wild.
For years to come. People will continue to do that. Kind of like they do in China and in Japan. Before all this happened, there was a lot of people,
right? Super normal in China.
Normal. It's very normal behavior.
Do it all the time.
Yes.
All over the place, all day, every day. There are tons of people that wear masks.
Yeah.
It is super normal in China. So I was thinking it's funny about vaccination status, because there's been some articles come out. We had a bit of a bump there early in the spring.
Yes.
Where because we don't have zero. When I say any, I mean zero manufacturing capability for vaccines at all. Which means that Canada has bought more vaccines per capita than any country on earth.
Wow.
We've bought enough vaccinations to vaccinate every citizen 5 times over.
Wow.
One of the other interesting things, so we've kind of turned a corner here. One of the other things that's come up recently is that Canada might end up being, as a percentage of its citizenship, the most vaccinated country in the world by the time we're done. Which is pretty cool too. I mean, we're pretty when the authorities say go do something, we generally go do it.
Sure.
We've had anti-vax protests. Most people think those people are crazy. And the amount of people is pretty small as it relates to the population. But I think they're expecting that we might get over 90% of Canadians vaccinated. I think we're at 60-something% have one
first
dose.
Yes.
Right now, because we're doing this weird thing where we are spreading out the 2 doses a lot longer.
Yeah.
So that we can get everyone with 1 dose. So everyone has 1 dose. But now that we have so much vaccine supply, nice. Cheryl can actually now call tomorrow and get booked for her second appointment.
Good.
And then they expect I'll be able to get mine a few weeks later. And Isaac got his vaccine.
Good.
So he's 12.
Yep.
So he's actually it's Isaac's birthday was yesterday. So Isaac is 13 now.
13.
Yeah. That's a whole other podcast, with teenagers. But anyways, it's been nice to feel like we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I think next year for us, at least in Minnesota, I don't know about other states, it actually feels like it's, unless something drastically happens, which something can, obviously. There's some kind of new strain, something weird, there's a weird turn of events. It's going to be very normal. We have 0 plans to offer distance learning. We have nothing. In place. We're putting all of our cards on, all of our money on one thing. It's called full back in person learning. It's dang. And it looks like it's gonna happen.
We'll see how it goes. So we're recording on a Sunday. Mm-hmm. So we're recording this week's podcast on the last day of this week, which is funny. But we're doing that for a reason. And what's funny about us And like, I'm sure that the adults that are listening, people who are busy with kids and families can understand that, like, we have a set time that we do this. It's Monday nights at 8:00. And if we don't do it Monday nights at 8:00, the rest of our schedule seems to go to hell. Like, it's just awful trying to get, like, we've had to like just toss weeks out because we just can't find a way to make it work. It'd be a little bit easier now that the summer's here.
Yes, for sure.
But in general, it's been really difficult to find a time other than Monday. But the reason why we did not record on Monday, there was a couple reasons. Yep. But what'd you get into on Monday?
So if you know me, you know that I don't build anything. So in other words, I have no construction abilities or mechanical abilities, actually,
me neither,
to be honest. So I know very little about a lot of things, and I'm paranoid about breaking many things. So anyway, Nicole, my wife, was the end of the month was her birthday, and she had requested since last year. So this has been 2 years of birthdays, of requests, and then finally I did it this year. She wanted a swing for the backyard, and she didn't want it for the kids. This is like for her. This is something for her. So, I had looked into some stuff last year during the COVID times, and there wasn't a way to be able to do anything, so kind of just ignored it. But then this year I was like, okay, what would it take to be able to do this? And there was a welder who sells basically all these steel components to be able to put together your own swing set. And they give you all the instructions. They give you all of the giant pieces of steel that are specific for this swing set, and then they give you all of the things you need to go buy. Now, I looked at the thing and I looked at the pictures of everybody, and then I saw a guy on there that, how people comment, and then he showed their swing set of where what's at, and he wrote something to the effect of, I built this in 6 hours, but I work in construction. So just so you have an idea about what you might be getting into here. There was a really amazing long thread that someone posted, and it was basically a blog post of their sequence of events of how they put together their swing set. They had a specific thing in mind, and it was awesome. But what was cool about it is that many of the posts are about how many times they screwed up. So they told you about all the different screw ups and about different things that are going to happen and whatever it might be. And all of those things happened to me. So it started on Friday. I bought all the materials. I went with my son and we bought all the things, all the wood and the lumber and all the different things. And I was hoping that
you bought 4x4s.
Yes, 4x4. They were 10-foot 4x4s. So big freaking posts. That's what they are.
Wood, yeah.
And then and so then I started working on it and doing all the different things. And these were super long days that I was working on this thing. And finally it was starting to come together. And on Monday we had off because it was Memorial Day. And I was working from the morning till the afternoon, basically now assembling this giant monstrosity. And I was in the middle of the assembly process, and I looked at the time, and we were supposed to record, I think, at around 6-ish, my time. And it was like 5:45, and I was pouring sweat, and I was out things were still on sawhorses and whatever it might be, and I was like, I can't just leave this here. I could have, but it wasn't a good idea. Plus, then I would have had to run in and then be like sweat fest and whatever. So I ended up asking if we could reschedule. But it makes me have huge props and respect for people that are able to go ahead and do this type of stuff. So I was talking to you before that one of my pet peeves is when people say the statements, something to the effect of, we built our house. We built our new house. And the fact is, they chose all of the different components of their new house. They didn't build anything. They didn't build crap. Someone built all their stuff, but they say they built it. And the reason why it's a pet peeve of mine is because my dad was in construction his whole entire life and actually did build houses. There's several still that are still exist till today in California and in New Mexico. There's several houses that he built from scratch. But anyway, I have huge respect for people like my dad and anybody else that knows about anything, because there's a lot. It's not just the labor parts, but there's all of this thinking that has to happen. There was specific cutting of angles that they described on the thing, and they made it look really easy. It was not easy. The skill of cutting things was not easy. I had the tools. I had different tools, and I had all the things I needed, but my God, it's anybody that does that kind of stuff, you are amazing. Especially, I mean, people, I know there's teachers too. I know teachers. Stephen Rayel was one of the people. He does all kinds of different woodworking type of things just for fun and a kind of a side business. And we know other people too that build things. Yes, that build things and they create things and then they either sell them or they just build them for themselves. And it's like, whew, you are amazing.
We try to remind Isaac that he doesn't necessarily have to go to university, like to be successful. Trade school, like going and doing an apprenticeship and then becoming an electrician or a plumber. Yeah. If you run your own plumbing business, I mean, you make so much money.
Yeah. Like we need you.
Oh yeah, and they're jobs that people generally don't think to do.
No.
But if you're if you go and get into carpentry, and then start your own carpentry business, you're making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, legitimately.
Yeah. It's a super skills, all of those, man.
And then you have more than a good income to, pursue your passions outside of work.
Oh, for sure.
As well.
Exactly.
And it's I have a huge amount of respect for people that build stuff like that too. I've done a couple projects. Like we built our deck for our pool. Yeah. And I built most of that. I certainly planned it and had got my dad to come and help me and my father-in-law. Yeah. Who fought the entire time, by the way. It was so funny watching. But then, in doing like the shingling of our shed, I did that last summer. So, I have a ton of respect for people who do handiwork, because I'm not a handyman. I don't know how much to say about this yet. And I just kind of threw this in there, but we're making some minor changes to the podcast. And we think the content, the actual podcast itself, is in a really good spot in my mind. Like I think that we're still talking about what we want to talk about. We're having fun doing it. It's been really hard on us because we get a lot of our energy for the podcast from being together, 3 or 4 times a year. And I think both of us really miss that. But we got some changes incoming. So all I can say to that is, if you're listening, stay tuned. We're going to be making some pretty big announcements very soon. One of them is ready to announce, even though I'm not going to say it right yet. And then there's probably a couple more coming. So there's lots going on here in OnEducationville town, whatever. And I think it's gonna be great. So Twitter Blue came out in Canada and I believe Australia this week.
Okay. Twitter Blue.
Twitter Blue is a paid Twitter subscription.
Okay.
It is, I think it's like $3.95 a month Canadian.
Okay.
So somewhere around $3 a month.
Yeah.
$3 a month or so US. $2.95 maybe they'll make it. So
what does it give you?
So you get to, not much, to be fair. I was actually writing in our company and Participates company Slack. Imagine being so popular that you could charge people for basic functionality and that people would pay money for it.
Yeah.
And they will make, I guarantee you, they'll make $300 or $400 million a year from this. I guarantee you there are 10 million people that will pay for this.
For sure.
They have hundreds of millions of users. I guarantee you there are 10 million people that'll, and I'm one of them, so whatever.
There you go.
So let me tell you what you get. You get the bookmark folders. So this is a way to organize saved content. You organize tweets and manage them so that when you need it, you can find it. It's in its own bookmarked folder. So this would be good if you save a lot of tweets. First off, which I don't. Other people's tweets.
I know a lot of people do that though.
Right.
They bookmark a lot of things.
And you wanted to like organize them into folders. You can do that. So the second thing is called reader mode. So I actually think this is kind of nice. It works pretty well. Reader mode allows you to read Twitter threads. It puts them all into one view. Oh. So if someone writes a 9 tweet thread, you know how like people will respond in the middle of them and whatever. When you click, every time it identifies that there's a thread, a little icon appears in the top right hand corner, says to activate reader mode. You click on that and it turns that thread into like a readable page. So cool. And then when you scroll down to the bottom, so you're done reading the thread, there's a button at the bottom that says exit reader mode. So that's nice. Reader mode.
Nice.
And then here's the last one is the funniest one because it's the one people have been asking for in some form or another since Twitter started. Yep. And now they're going to make you pay for basically what every content editing thing does just gives you. And that's you now have the ability to undo a tweet. And this works almost exactly like the Google Gmail undo. Like you can recall an email. Did you know that you can do that?
Yes.
So you can, if you're in the Gmail interface, you can send an email and then you can set it to a certain amount of time, I think up to 15 seconds, where you can go, oh crap, and you can click on recall and they will not see the email. So you have 15 seconds to pull it back.
It brings it back.
And undo and change it or resend it or fix who you sent it to or whatever nonsense. If you put everybody in CC or something, or if you replied all instead of just hitting reply, you can recall it. In this case, you can get up to 30 seconds where you can undo the tweet. So what it does is it actually does it. What's interesting is that it doesn't send it for 30 seconds. Okay. So it's not like it puts it in a queue to send and then sends and then brings it back. It waits for 30 seconds for you.
30-second time period to.
There's a 30-second countdown on sending your tweet.
Yeah.
Up to 30 seconds. So I think the intervals are 10. I think it's 15, 20, and then 30, where you can set it up to 30 seconds. So you can hit undo, can fix your spelling mistake, put in your Oxford comma if you feel so inclined.
Can you edit a tweet or no?
So if you hit undo, it brings you back to the text editor, to like the tweet.
Sure.
That so it doesn't delete it.
But if it posted it, can you do an edit like you can on Facebook?
No.
You know what I mean?
No,
you can't edit.
No, you still can't edit a tweet that you've already posted and that you haven't undone.
I got it.
So you have 30 seconds to check your tweet and make sure you got it right after you've pressed send.
If you were a business and you were running the promo for a specific business, you run social media for them, you would want this, obviously. You want to have the ability. You post it, you take a quick look, you're like, oh, God. I can bring that back. It happens so easily, on emails or whatever. There's a spelling mistake or whatever it might be. that would be cool to be able to bring it back. Or that one thing that I always talk about, where you tweet enrage tweets because you're mad, and then in 10 seconds after you send it, you're like, I shouldn't have sent that because now that was not a good idea.
Yeah, this would
and
be
that's
like...
happened to me many times, and I didn't recall. I didn't get to recall them.
Yeah. This is like if this Anthony Weiner wishes this was around,
yes.
5 years ago or 10 years ago.
For sure he does.
Maybe we might be like President Anthony Weiner right now if it wasn't for like if he could have undone pictures of his D. So
imagine that. I don't even want to imagine that.
Brutal. So is it worth it? Sure, maybe. I mean, it's. Okay. I think it's at one of those price points where you wouldn't even notice it.
Yeah.
And that's also probably what they've done, right? They've set it up with your iPhone. It just subscribes through like your Apple account, your App Store.
Yeah.
It's an App Store subscription. You don't even notice it, right? It's like $3.95.
Yeah.
So it might be one of those things where, and for like you said, like a company or a politician, it's probably worth it for sure.
100%. Yes.
So it's funny that you linked this article about whether to limit how public school teachers can discuss race in their classrooms. Because I just saw, it's funny, you can talk about this in a second. I just saw an article this afternoon, about a boy graduating from high school, and draped over his shoulders was a Mexican flag.
Oh,
this happened in North Carolina. Had a Mexican flag draped over his shoulders.
Okay.
And he was denied his diploma on the stage at the graduation because he had a Mexican flag wrapped over his shoulders. How's that one strike you?
There's so many ridiculous
something?
Things. Yes, that's so many different things that are just so dumb. This also relates to, I think, a conversation that we were having in our DM group about stupid dress code policies, just different things that we do, that we fight these fights that honestly they don't need to be fought. That's a kid expressing themselves on really one of the greatest culminating days of their lives. So that's a fantastic thing. And if the kid wants that, I mean, if you do something vulgar, you know what I mean? Or you're doing something demeaning or something, whatever it might be, of course, yeah, we're not going to allow you to do X, whatever it might be. If you're wearing something that promotes, for example, alcohol or drugs or whatever it might be, you probably would be like, no, you can't really do that. Where, you're pushing the boundaries. This and like, I read a thing about some person with nose rings, about the clothes that someone was wearing, dress shoes. A kid was wearing tennis shoes instead of dress shoes, and they weren't going to allow them on the stage. A teacher saw that happen, took off their shoes, and gave them to the kid. The kid put on his shoes and was allowed to go in and get his diploma. I mean, obviously, teachers do those kind of things. This is just disgusting, though, that this is even the case. And there's some people who are arguing for the continuance of these types of things, these kind of compliance things. I'm sorry, but the work world, along with the school world, along with our world in general, has changed a lot. And there's a lot of things now, Mike, I think that are normalized now. So, for example, this tattoo that I have on my forearm. Back in the day, let's say even 15, especially 20 years ago, and even worse, as the farther you go back, if you had a tattoo, that was like a symbol that you were a criminal, a gang member, a bad person of some sort, or trashy or something, whatever it might be. Something was wrong with you, which is, of course, we all know that's not the case. That was just that's part of the things. But cultural norms have definitely shifted on a bunch of these things, and you know what? That's good. People, we're all humans, but you know what? We're allowed to express ourselves in a variety of different ways, and fantastic. Thank God we're allowed to go ahead and do those types of things. In this case, these kids are leaving the school. They are all these kids are wearing the outfit that needs to be worn for the ceremony. If you want to personalize it somehow, that should be, it's okay. But we fight these fights that are just so stupid.
And it's part of a larger conversation, which is what this article is about. This idea that, I think it's crazy that the conversation is even happening, in the sense that we would be opposed to, for example, teaching about the Tulsa massacre.
Yes.
Right? Like, as if you would be opposed to that or want to frame it a certain way that made it look better than it is, which is,
I know.
A bloody murder of hundreds of people, without cause. And again, the 1619 Project, which has come up a couple times in a couple episodes recently. History is replete with bad actors.
Yes.
And evil people and terrible situations. And to conflate being proud of your country and where you live and what you do for a living and the people that the community that you are with, talking honestly about what has happened in your country and how you're going to discuss it. It's, you can't confuse those two things. They don't, me telling you that, for example, John A. Macdonald, the first Prime Minister of Canada, was a raging alcoholic and prone to fighting people, other politicians, and was a massive, incredibly massive racist. Me saying and acknowledging that does not make me less proud to be a Canadian.
No.
It just means that I'm honest about what our past is like.
Yeah.
And you guys are having the same conversations down there, or at least trying to. But we have people limiting those conversations or forcing them to not happen at all, right?
Yeah. And in specific states, Georgia is in the news right now again, but Texas is a huge one. There's a legislation that I think is just waiting for the governor to sign. And the reason why Texas is so important is not only is it a gigantic state with, hundreds of millions of people that live there, but it's also one of the things that impacts the textbook market the most. It has a gigantic, obviously, school population, but it has a lot of pull and leverage. And basically what it says, this legislation, is it's not only going to ban critical race theory, but it's also going to minimize references to slavery and anti-Mexican discrimination. It's freaking mind-boggling that we can't just be honest about things, that we still have to slant the truth to soften it. For who? For the people in power? Yeah, that's exactly what it is. For the people in power, for people that are white and rich and want to continue to hold that power and tell a specific narrative that just isn't completely true. Many of it is definitely leaving out some really important facts and how we marginalized past tense and then continue to do so many people in our country, and how there's a long history of it. And it's like, that has nothing to do with political movements or whatever it might be. It may be connected to something, but here's just the thing. It's like, you need to tell the truth. And this is what you do as a teacher. You tell the truth, and then you discuss, like, how does that affect us right now? And really, that's the biggest thing, is like what kids can think through the events that are currently happening and then be told exactly what happened as far as in the past. And with state by state legislation being the way it is, Mike, it basically, the way that history is told in the United States is going to vary 100% from state to state. You're going to be told different things depending upon where you end up growing up, which is just freaking blows my mind away. And it's just another thing. And that is just what as we talk about this in many of the episodes as far as the podcast, I wonder, is there ever an end? Are we going to be able to make headway on this? Because many times we just get blocked off and no, we're not going to make any headway here. We're going to pass laws that don't even allow you to talk about that.
It is pretty crazy, and I think that the sign of a country that is willing to face their own demons is also a country where the people are proud of it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't diminish you wanting to be Canadian or American or British or Spanish or Mexican or whatever, to admit the failings of the people who have come before us. You have to do it.
Yeah.
And we're facing some really tough conversations right now with residential schools. And Canada we have our own demons in our own closets, and we're starting to face them. And in fact, one of the things that's happening, a law just got passed just this week, where we will have a new national statutory holiday on September 30th. It is a day to remember what Canada did to Indigenous First Nations people in the country. We are, and I think it's a great sign that we're taking this seriously.
Yeah. And
that there's still tons of work to do, but this is a great way to start. So
maybe we can learn from you guys.
Well,
we can only hope.
We all need to learn. I think that the first step is just being willing to learn.
For sure.
And then moving forward.
Absolutely.
Speaking of moving forward, we have a great guest, and when we come back, we'll be speaking to Keturah Proctor, so stay with us.
We are building this virtual community of educators who share an interest in game design and teaching new skills. We will use this space to connect, collaborate, and innovate with Sandbox.
That's Sebastian Bourget. He's the co-founder and chief operating officer at the Sandbox.
This community is here to provide guidance, support, feedback, and suggestions on how to best use the Sandbox within the context of teaching and learning how to make video games. It allows also to connect experts and educators, bringing together existing creators and members of the Sandbox game platform community with professional educators.
The Sandbox community has grown into a vibrant space of 100+ educators. How can you get involved? More to come later in the episode.
All right, welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Our guest is a 6th grade math and English language arts teacher in the Elmsford Union Free School District. She's a former graduate and current resident of the school district in which she teaches. This unique perspective has afforded her the opportunity to forge authentic relationships with the students, parents, and community that she serves. She is the co-founder of the Community Action Alliance, which is an organization dedicated to serving students in the Elmsford Union Free School District whose families were directly impacted by COVID-19. She's also the co-founder of Together for Justice. This group harnesses the power of community members to speak out against instances of social justice, bias, and racism. Welcome to the podcast, Keturah Proctor.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. This is great.
It's great to have you. So, Keturah, you teach and live in the same area you grew up in, and I find that fascinating. It must give you a unique perspective on the community, how it's changed, how it's stayed the same over time. I remember, it's a funny story. I remember when I was student teaching, and my teacher mentor, who she lived in the same area she taught in. And she doesn't do the grocery shopping because it would sometimes take her hours to do the grocery shopping, because she would get spotted by families from the school and end up talking in the grocery store for hours. Because she couldn't feel like she could just, I gotta go get my carrots now. I always thought it was pretty funny. So she sends her husband off to do the grocery shopping. I'd love to know what you like and dislike about learning and living and now working all in the same region. Do you do your own grocery shopping and get caught in the store talking? And I imagine this gives you a great opportunity to have really deep, meaningful connections with your community.
That's a great question. And I absolutely do my own grocery shopping. That's actually hilarious. Yes, I actually do. I do my own banking. I go to the car wash. But I have to say, it's truly an honor to be a part of my community. When I was leaving undergrad, one of my professors says, "You have to leave. It's time for you to leave. Spread your wings. Go somewhere else." And I was like, "No, I'm going home." And that meant so much for me because my community is really small. We're a small village. And the idea of everyone knowing who you are and your last name, that matters. That still matters here. And to be able to forge relationships with families has been so rewarding. It's been absolutely positive experience. I've not had one negative experience. And I think it's what actually sets me apart from some of the other teachers in my district. To be able to live and work. My own daughter also goes to the same school district. She's graduating this year. There is an immense amount of pride and family and again, community that, is really hard to replicate. So I looked at it as my obligation to go back and to be part of this wonderful place that gave me so much. And I felt like it was my responsibility to do the same thing for the students who would be coming up. So I've been a teacher here this is ending year 21. And I have been able to see students who now have their own children who are cycling through the district. And there's nothing but tremendous pride and, humility that goes along with that. It also positions me in a space that sometimes is awkward because the students are my neighbors. They actually are my neighbors. I have a student who right now lives next door to me and they're my neighbors. And that's absolutely okay. Because I think when you get to the root of really what education is and should be, it's collaborative, it's community. And if we're so forced and focused on putting this distance and dividing line between teachers and families, then we're only saying that matters when we go into the school building, but it matters all throughout. Our lives are more than just the school building. And so if you look at it through that lens, then you're not really being authentic to the work. I feel that if you really, really believe in your community, you have to love your community. You have to love the district that you're in. You have to love those students, so much so that I'm also saying I'm a part of you in this. And so there's ownership there. Many years ago, there were a number of teachers who lived in the community. And that was a beautiful feeling because on every street, there was someone from school. And so no more was there the divide between home and school. It was, we're all in this together. And so when we go to school, I go to work. It's not just I'm going to work. I'm going to see you in a couple minutes. Okay, I'll see you in a few. I've had parents knock on my door and say, "Hey, can you help with number 4? And there are times where I'm like, no, because I got to help my own kid with number 4. But okay, I'll give you a couple minutes, And so parents have been nothing but, tremendously respectful. I hear students when there's, the weather's outside and they're like, "Ms. Proctor, can we shovel for you? There's nothing more than just a lot of humility to be able to still be here and have the community really be work in tandem with me. And so when things happen and when we struggle as a school district and when we struggle as a community, we're doing this work together. And when things happen, we work together. And I think if we're asking teachers to develop relationships in our classrooms, then we absolutely need to be making sure that we're developing those same authentic relationships outside of the classroom. We should not be putting barriers, especially at this point.
So being in this community as long as you have, you've seen it change in the terms of the way it handles race and history and social justice. Maybe take some time to talk about your work with Together for Justice and how you've been able to take those deep community relationships you were just talking about and turn them into something productive in terms of speaking out on the issues of marginalization that continue to plague many communities in the United States.
Absolutely. So I'll just give you, so you can picture it in your head. My community is separated by a main street. And that at one point it separated our town, our village racially. And there was very much a white side and a black side. However, the funny part is that usually the south side is like the black side, like in most communities, like, oh, on the south side. Ours happens to be the north side. So that's like the funny part of it. Like, oh, we live on the north side. But you know, we still have this actual line that's a separation line. And I'm a product of my school district, my family as well. And so when we hear stories way back, everyone at school would be great friends at school, right? Everyone's wonderful, great, gets along, and then goes home to their respective sides. And so just think about what does that actually foster? That's like reinforcing, like, yeah, we're great here together, but then we leave and we go to our respective sides. So there's that. Over time, yeah, you're right. We have had a lot of integration and things have changed demographically, racially, demographically, things have changed over time, but that line still persists. And so you can see even by socioeconomic status, the side where the folks of color primarily live much lower than the other side. And that's really interesting. I happen to live on the side where the folks of color live. And people have asked all the time, how come you don't move? I'm like, yeah, no, I'm never moving, because that's where I'm centered. So yeah, we definitely have seen a lot of change there. My work in the community and my work in the district really has always been to be the voice. Sometimes it's the other voice, I'm always in the one who's in a meeting will probably be the dissenter and say no. So no, that doesn't work for everybody. So how can we fix that? What can we do about that? And to elevate the voices of the families and the students who ultimately just want their students to have a great experience at school and send their children to school with nothing but trust and really hope that they're getting the best experience. And so sometimes we've had struggles in that area, right? Especially racially with tensions, and politically the world is changing and things are changing the landscape. So what the goal was for Together for Justice and some of the other work that we've been doing is to give people in the community the resources, the tools, the vocabulary, the language, the background to be able to be more informed and to make decisions that are best for their children, and to be able to advocate for their children in a way where they're not tagged as the complainers or the crazy parents, but really in a way where their concerns are being heard because they are real concerns. And so that has obviously, I'm an employee of the district, but I also live here and I'm also, ingrained in the community. That definitely can put you in a tough spot. And again, my daughter is also a product of that district as well. So there are moments where we've had tense moments and you've had to kind of be, courageous and step out and say, wait a second, this isn't working and I'm not okay with it. And once you do that, you realize that the community will stand with you and beside you. And I think that that's definitely really important. So in terms of the actual changes, we've seen communities or students who are moving from more urban areas and they're moving further north. But then that gives you sort of a population that's transient, that they're not rooted here and they just come and go. We've seen a lot of students who are coming from other countries. More recently, we've seen students from who were detained at the border, and now they are headed our way. And so there are huge shifts here. in addition to that, we still have our, stronghold families who've been here for decades, since 1940. And so they're rooted, and there is this, you're trying to create some sort of harmony here by saying we all belong, right? And where's the space for everyone? And that was the work with the Community Action Alliance, where we realized in COVID, there was a certain group of students who were really struggling, families were really struggling, and they needed a lot of help. And so, again, I guess when you take a look at education and what really is the purpose, it's more than your classroom. It's more than textbook. It's more than curriculum. It really is elevating the voices of those who, or helping to empower those who don't necessarily know where to start, but need to also have voice. And it also is taking a look and examining ourselves and having really reflective conversations inward and looking inward. And so, even with last year with the murder of George Floyd, we were all home. And it was very troublesome because students were home and they were watching the video over and over and over and over and over on television. And the community, you could feel it. It was palatable. It was tense, and you could feel things were not okay, and we needed to do something. We, in turn, organized the Rally for Justice. We had over 300 folks there. It was a beautiful event. Students came out. That was how I met some of my students from this year. They're like, I saw you at that rally. I'm like, yeah, okay. But it was necessary. And not everyone felt comfortable doing that. It was almost as if, should we do this? Is our village ready to handle this? Should we rock the boat? There's all of these, questions. And I'm like, we absolutely should. Why would we not? Because this is really what we need we need to do this. We need to outwardly say, this is definitely not okay. So when you talk about racial tension, and that actually was like almost like the precipice of what was to come, because after that, so many other things, happened. Our students are asking for this to be front and center. They're saying, yeah, we're going to continue to talk about this, and we want it everywhere. We want it in our village. We want it in our schools. We want this to be part of who we are. So that work has been really, really important to me. And again, also in the region, that's something that we're starting to see.
It's amazing. There's a strange confluence of coincidences happening here. In the first part of the podcast that people just listened to, Glenn and I were talking about critical race theory and about people trying to fight back against teaching it for whatever reason. And you have a book on the back of your bookshelf that literally says critical race theory on it. And I happen to not know exactly where Elmsford was. So while you were talking, I was looking it up. And I mean, Elmsford is in New York, the New York-ish part of New York. And, saying that as Canadian as I can, I don't know where the hell New York ends and the rest of it begins. But the point is that, a lot of people, and to be honest, including myself, wouldn't have, we knew that there was, slavery was generally everywhere, especially early on. And racism is everywhere. This is the Northeast United States, and there was a north side and a south side of Elmsford, freaking New York. And that is amazing to me, and terrible. Because I think that students aren't being served properly if they don't realize, if they don't think about the fact, because I think even now we associate the Northeast, and the West Coast as, liberal, enlightened, and progressive, is a great word to use. And the fact is that there is a history of racism everywhere. And there's a history of slavery everywhere, including 20 minutes north of Manhattan. Right?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'm like taking notes as I'm listening to you talk because I don't want to miss anything. So you are spot on. You are spot on. So even here, 20 minutes north of New York City, the famed New York City, we still encounter racism. And so to your point, I saw something on one of the social media posts, and it was saying that it's not the shark, it's the water. And it was specifically talking about white supremacy culture, which we could unpack as well. But it's everything. It's embedded in every institution. It's embedded in every practice. So when people think about racism, they really just think about interpersonal exchanges, like, oh, so, you said something to me that wasn't okay. You're racist. Oh my gosh. Okay. So there's that. But there is so much more than that. It is actually ingrained into all of our institutions. It's legally, like, it's present. It's everywhere. It's a part of the fabric of the United States. The end. And there is so much pushback from folks who've never even opened this text to know what it's inside of it. And I have to be really honest. If you've read the entire piece, like, kudos to you, because I haven't even gotten through a third of it. It is that dense. And it really talks about not the interpersonal pieces, not the individual pieces, but it talks about the structural pieces and the systematic pieces of racism that have framed our experiences here in the United States. And so sometimes when I see these posts, and now we're seeing legislation actually being enacted to counteract, like, don't even mention race in classrooms, I think it's so ridiculous, number one, because critical race theory is usually something that's talked about in higher ed. So when you get to, undergraduate, institutions and colleges and universities, then you might hear that and beyond. So the fact that we're talking about elementary students saying no critical race theory, like, that's a joke, because that's laughable. So one, that makes no sense because you've never read it, number one. Number two, how dare you say that your existence here, listen, everyone here, your existence really doesn't matter. We're just going to protect our feelings because we don't want to talk about anything that's uncomfortable. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to make laws that actually say that we're going to do this. That in and of itself, like, I know it's real, but I can't even believe that it's real because it makes no sense when you really break it apart, And so, right, so there's that. In New York State, we happen to be fortunate where the New York State Board of Regents has actually come out with some guidance that's been very, very much the antithesis of no critical race theory. The New York State Board of Regents came out with initially their call to action. That was in April of this year. And the language in that document is beautiful because it literally says, we realize that we have some issues here and we are going to attack them head on. And we realize that racism is real and bias is real. And they cite actual instances. They talk about COVID. They talk about police brutality. They talk about, discrimination based on sex. They went in. And I was like, wow, this came from New York State, the Board of Regents, like, whoa. And then the following month, they adopted an equity policy. And the urgency, the suggestion was all school districts need to get on board. And that in and of itself is wonderful because it provides district leaders now with their why. This is why you need to do this. This is why it's important. And so it happens to be that while some other states in the country are like, absolutely not, New York State is like, oh no, absolutely yes. And so very fortunate to be in this location. But when I have another friend who was a school leader in Tennessee, and she's like, I think we have to relocate because I can't work here and not at all address what's real life. How can we not embed this into what we're doing? And I think people feel, I've heard people say, oh, well, you're teaching, a perspective or you're teaching a certain side and that's not fair. But what's not fair? Because we're telling someone's experience, we're telling the experience of a group of people. Why would that be unfair? And so I think it comes back to this whole idea of not wanting to be uncomfortable and protecting our privilege and hiding behind that, so much so that we're enacting legislation so we don't even have to address it. And like, that's just, if I don't know what white supremacy culture is, there you go. I mean, like, do you really need to say anything else? I mean, like, boom, there it is right there. And even in that, we use this term, I use that term often, and even in the work that I do in my district. And we had to unpack that, because when you say white supremacy, instantly, you have images of like, very right wing and violence and things like that. And I'm like, no, I'm talking about like everyday stuff. It's part of the culture, y'all. It's just what it is. And so that in and of itself, unlearning is just as important as the learning piece. And I think where I am right now is centered on the unlearning. We all went to elementary school. We learned about Christopher Columbus, and all of that stuff is ingrained in us. Even those who with the best of intentions are like, I reject all of that crap. It's still in us. And so we actively have to unlearn the stuff that was put into us all
100%.
of these years.
Awesome. I talk a lot, shockingly, because I'm, a white Canadian dude. But I'm obsessed with the concept of redlining, and I know that Elmsford was like, that idea of like a north side and a south side, and property values and stuff like that. It's people need to get into this stuff, because I know it's in the weeds a little bit about critical race theory, but you will find, as you learn about redlining in particular, how like ingrained systemic racism is in where you live, and why your home is where it is, and why other people's homes are where they live. It's an astonishing legacy of racism in the United States. This idea of redlining. That I'm absolutely fascinated with, and we get to talk about it on the podcast every once in a while, because it's important. But I want to turn our focus now, I guess, to the pandemic from your unique perspective as a longtime community member. Neighbors, you said, teaching your neighbors, teaching kids down the street. It must be tough to see your neighborhoods struggle under the weight of jobs and health and everything. Can you talk a bit about the Community Action Alliance and what you're doing to help the people of your district get by during this time?
Absolutely. So you're absolutely right. It was very difficult to see. I knew the internal struggles that I was facing, as with my own family and family members, and I have, obviously a group of friends at work who always go above and beyond, the workday to support families. And when we were text and talk, we realized that we were helping folks a lot, and it was beyond, hey, can you get some school supplies for us? It was, can you give us groceries for 2 weeks? Because we don't have any money here. And the food pantries and things where the surplus was low. And so, you would go to a pantry, but there would be no protein. Or you would go to a pantry and it would only be canned things. So if you have 3 kids, what do you do with just your cans, right? And so we started talking and realizing, like, wait, we're working in silos. That's ridiculous. Let's do this together. And so that's how Community Action Alliance was founded. It was out of straight need for our students and their families. And it came about really organically because we knew individuals who did not have. We knew of individuals who lost their jobs. We knew of moms who had just had babies and then there was no income. And now we're all home. So then what? So how is it that I'm asking you to sign on to class virtually? But I also know at home you have very, very little to sustain you. And so that's where our work started. We also wanted this to be a resource where families could receive legal help and help with employment and other things, because there is another organization in a couple towns over, but you'd have to be able to get there to access the resources. And if you don't have that option, then what? So our work really started with gathering donations. People were very generous, however they could be. And what we did was we went grocery shopping, and we started with 12 families. We now have over 50 families. And these are families that really are in tremendous need. So we would go to a wholesale club and we would actually go grocery shopping and then deliver. And to see the faces and to see the students who would, we were all masked up really at that time. We would just leave it on the step and ring the doorbell and stand by the car and just wave. The students would come out and they couldn't even carry the bag because it was so heavy with resources. And then we would get the text messages. Thank you, miss. Thank you, miss. Thank you so much. Thank you. I have 2 weeks. It was astonishing to see that in just a moment of time that things could change so drastically for folks. We also had families who experienced death where the primary, income provider is no longer alive. They passed away. So then what happens? What happens then? So we were able to make sure that not, in that moment that the families had what they needed financially, but that meant your Con Ed, your lights, your electric, is that going to get shut off? If you needed if your only source of communication was your cell phone, how do you manage that when you're then managing the expenses of death? And remember, with COVID, we couldn't even bury people or cremate people for a long period of time because that took a long time. So there were so many issues, and there was a lot of trauma embedded in that. And it was difficult for us too, because we kept getting the bad calls, there was always something happening. So the Community Action Alliance, thank goodness for the people who were the organizers and all the volunteers, because we came together to really support our families. So that work happened all, last year and all throughout this school year. And we worked alongside the mobile food pantry. And again, when there were resources enough extra, we were able to bag and whatever. But otherwise, we were at the wholesale club and we were packing it up and delivering to students ourselves. And we did that throughout the summer because, again, there was that issue too with no school, no summer, no camp, nothing. Kids are home and they had no food. And that was real life, had no food. Pictures of empty refrigerators, families who were eating just beans because there was nothing, right? And so, again, being able to be connected to your community, to be able to be trusted enough and welcomed enough by the folks in your community to say, hey, can you help me, is a big deal. And that's why I think, going back to the original question, being part of this community more so than just an employee matters so much more, because there's so much that we did in partnership with each other. And I think that is what education is. That's what it is to me. It's beyond a textbook. It's beyond a classroom. And if you are working somewhere and you love your students, then you get all in with them no matter what. And that's what we did. We were all in.
It's important also that we talk about what school leaders and teachers should be thinking about as they plan for the reopening of the buildings for the 21-22 school year. And how would you advise school leaders and teachers as they prepare for a school year that it's certainly not going to be the same as this year, the 2020-21 year? It's definitely not the same as it was previously in 2018 and 2019. What should we do as far as when we get back? Because I have heard teachers say this audibly, I just want to get back to when it was normal. And so much has happened in these years, and it has to do partially with the pandemic, but it also has to do with much more than that. You were just mentioned George Floyd, and it's kind of like our eyes have really come open for many of us, and things are staring us in the face, and many educators are vocally stating, I don't want to look at that. I want it to be back where it was. What are some things that you can advise? For example, leaders are struggling. What are the best steps? What are some things that you should do as far as even kicking off the school year this next year?
So that's a great question. I almost wanted to say, did you read my Facebook post the other day? Because I blasted that on my post on my newsfeed. So I wrote, asterisk, frustration. I cannot believe we are talking about going back to what was. That is so ridiculous. It was a long post. I was frustrated. So no, we don't go back. And the urge to go back, again, centers around the comfort of the teachers, but it does not at all speak to being responsive to where we know we need to be and what our kids need. And so the idea or the notion to even return back to normal is absolutely upsetting when I hear it. It actually makes me really angry, because I'm like, wait, hey, we just went through an entire thing, a real life, for real thing. 500,000 people are dead. Mad people, families are destroyed, and you want to go back to what? Okay, so there's that. And then we already know that what existed before did not work for all. So when I hear people say, well, it's for all students, I'm like, so that didn't work before for all students. So why would that even be something that we're holding so close to us? I always say, like, you need to let go of what was and begin to create what will be. And if you're not in that, then what are you actually doing? You are doing nothing but continuing to marginalize and oppress groups of students. And we've already said, well, we love our students, we love everyone. You don't, if you feel like going back is where we need to start. And so I think really what, school leaders and district leaders, really building leaders and district leaders really need to start thinking about is what will look different. If you're committed to not going back to the way things are, then what will look differently? What's going to change in your building? How is that going to change? What will be the evidence of that change? If you can't articulate that, then it didn't go back, then you're not changing anything. So yeah, we, for example, in our district, we have an equity policy. Great. We have an equity policy. Perfect. What's changing? So we have this document. What's changing, right? We're going to come back in September. What will look different for students? Is the learning going to be more authentic? Am I going to see representation of brown and black folks in the curriculum? No? Then what did we do? So this is an opportunity to really, really start over. We cannot continue to take like old systems and old practices and continue to retool them when we know that that doesn't work. So are we letting go of like the strict, stringent like assessment testing? We should, because guess what? Here in New York State, we didn't test kids last year, and guess what? They're fine. I don't have my 3 through 8 data. I don't have data from the 3 through 8 test, and guess what? That was okay. I'm good with that. And
the walls will not come crashing down.
No, they won't. And so I think it's okay to really think, when you're in teacher prep school, like if you could build your old school, what would it look like? What would it be? What would it be? If we could say, you know what, we're not doing that anymore. That didn't work for us before. Be courageous. Be brave enough to say, this is a no for us, y'all. And then really take a look at your students and see if they're represented in the fabric of the school. Because if we're just holding on to status quo, then who was that actually serving? No one but the adults, because it was routine and was comfortable, but that didn't serve students. And so I think student voice should be at the very center of what we're doing. Hey, y'all, what should change? Because they'll tell you. Hey, families, what should change? They'll tell you. And it's our jobs to be responsive to our communities. And it's not the other way around. They don't need to fit us. We need to fit them. And we need to be flexible and fluid and malleable, because guess what? It's an entire community. And if you're so fixed and so rigid in how it has to be, and your community has to adapt to you, then you really should not be in leadership. You should not be in front of students, because that's not what it's about. And I know that there's a whole power and control thing that's embedded here in that space. You need to let go of that. If you let people co-construct with you, if you allow folks in, you'll be amazed as to what comes out. And so, my work is always, let's do this together, because I don't know everything. And I live here and I still don't know everything. So what is it that you need to see differently? What is it that will work for you? You want that curriculum needs to change? Yeah, it does, because I'm not seeing representation. So let's fix that up. Our teachers need to have some professional learning here, because they don't know everything either, because they don't. Yeah, okay, yeah, we can do that. Our district leaders, yeah, guess what? You need to learn some and unlearn some things too. There's a lot of unlearning that needs to happen there.
Amazing. How can our audience connect with you online, be able to find you on social media, and any website or anything like that you'd like to share with them as well.
Well, that's wonderful. I'm on the Twitter. My handle is at kproctor1517. And if folks would like to email me, I am at kproctor.edu@gmail.
Thanks so much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank y'all. This was wonderful. Thank you.
The Sandbox is creating a learning ecosystem where educators can learn in weekly streams, bring ideas into their classrooms, collaborate with other educators, and become Sandbox ambassadors.
Our goal through the stream is to show the world how low the barrier can be to teaching and learning game making through our no-code and accessible platform. Anyone can do it. Passion and education. You can feel it in the streams as we explore and share ideas around game design implementation in your teaching practice.
Join the community to learn more at go.participate.com/sandbox. Thanks for listening to OnEducation. My name is Glenn Irvin. My co-host is Mike Washburn. OnEducation is part of the On Podcast Media Network. You can listen to this show and many others by great educators like Monica Burns, Mike Matera, Tisha Richmond, and many more by visiting onpodcastmedia.com. Want to get in touch with us? Check out our website, oneducationpodcast.com. You can tweet us at oneducationpod. Mike is at Mr. Washburn on Twitter, and I can be found on Twitter at IrvSpanish. You can find us on Facebook by visiting facebook.com/oneducationpod. We're also on Instagram at oneducationpod. If you're enjoying the show and think others would too, we would be thrilled if you shared it with them. Please leave us a rating or review in Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts. When you leave a rating, it gives our rankings a boost. This helps others discover the show. We want to thank our presenting sponsor, Participate, for supporting us. Check out participate.com to learn more about them. Thanks as always for listening. Stay awesome and see you soon.